In my career, I don't feel like I experienced a great deal of harassment in the workplace. I did, however, have two instances where I think sexual harassment was pivotal. The first was when I was working at WAI Radio. It was in San Antonio. I was praised and I was complimented and I was told I was doing a very good job. And suddenly I was called into the news director's office and he said, "Olive, we're going to have to let you go." I was shocked. Why? What had I done wrong? And his response was, "Well, we just don't think you sound good enough on the air. But in the meantime, would you help us make the smooth transition to the new person who we've hired to replace you?" So in 2 weeks' time, as I trained this guy, I learned that he had no journalism experience. He had graduated from a technical school, the Columbia School of Broadcasting, and he was making more money than I was. And that really hurt. I wound up filing an EEOC complaint and alleged that women were being underpaid and discriminated against at WAI wholesale. And the question was basically, "Ms. Talley, you haven't given us any tangible evidence of sexism or treatment or examples of women being treated differently than men. Is there anything you can think of that would, illustrate what you're talking about? Give us some proof," basically. And I can't quote this to have it go out on the air, but in essence, the FM station general manager appealed to his boss for help. The boss said, "Take her to La Mansión downtown," which was a major fancy hotel on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, "and give her a good lay job and put it on your expense account." And I thought the general manager, who was a rather rotund and large fella, he got beet red. He started to stand up in his chair. I thought he was going to punch me out. And his attorney, did this. My attorney did this. And I did this. And the deposition ended. A settlement came and we settled the case. And I was 22, when all this happened, my first job out of college. And I thought, oh my God, how could this be? I think I had my second encounter with sexual harassment, or I don't know, you define it. Here's the story. Houston's a major oil town, so anything that happens in the oil industry is of interest and value to readers and viewers in Houston. So there was some other big oil scandal, and somehow Muammar Gaddafi and that whole group in the Middle East was engaged in some sort of fight or shenanigan over that resulted in changes in oil prices or availability. So my editor walks up and says, "Hey, Olive, how would you like to go to Libya? And how would you like to go interview Muammar Gaddafi?" So I said, I don't have any experience in international reporting. I have no experience covering the oil industry per se. Why on earth would you ask me to go to Libya to try to land an interview with this dangerous and international figure, if not criminal? I mean, why me? And he said, "Oh, because I heard that Muammar really likes blondes." I was speechless. Those are the two that, when I really racked my brain, those are the two things that stood out. But I have to tell you, again, in all fairness and in balance, I got incredible support and I got incredible mentorship from many, many men in my career. But in some ways, I felt like I was on the ground floor of the beginning of the change. I was certainly aware of the Equal Rights Amendment push. And at KNOW and KCSW, I had covered a lot of stories.
I'm Olive Talley, and this is 90 Seconds. Outspoken women's rights advocate and Democratic National Committee member Billy Carr says women have utilized their votes, but not always for their own benefit.
I had interviewed Phyllis Schlafly. I had interviewed Billy Carr. I had interviewed, Sarah Weddington was right there in Austin. I met all those people. I interviewed them as a student. I think that's what informed me that I did have rights and that I could, again, ask the questions. You never know what's going to happen, but if you just ask the questions, maybe something will come out of it. My first experience in radio was in high school. I was on the student council, and I was asked to start a radio program at the local little bitty radio station to report on the events at the high school. I hated writing. I still don't love writing. It's like Red Smith, that famous sports writer, said, "Oh yeah, writing is easy. Just sit behind a typewriter and open a vein," right? But then my English teacher from my junior year said, "Olive, you've got to take a journalism class." And everything clicked. I got to ask questions. I got to be curious. I got to learn things.
The time is 11 minutes after 8 a.m. Now, the state and local news. Here's Olive Talley.
Don, the latest figures from the AAA Auto Club.
I think the most fun I ever had was in radio. I got to cover everything from a routine school board election and school board meetings and tax and bond issues for the city and city council. But I also covered plane crashes, and I covered hurricanes, and I covered tornadoes. And I learned so much as a student, and I was able to make so many mistakes as a student that were forgiven because of your inexperience. And I think it just really helped prepare me for when I got to bigger jobs where the stakes were higher if you made a mistake. There's not a single woman in any kind of high stakes career that doesn't feel fear. And I can assure you that fear was my prevailing emotion for probably the first 2 decades of my career. I've always told young people, if you're not afraid, then get out of the business, because I want you to be afraid of making a mistake. I want you to be afraid of getting it wrong. And that will help push you to get it right. Witnessing an execution of Ronald Clark O'Brien, the so-called Candyman killer who poisoned his children with, cyanide-laced pixie sticks. It was, a huge story in Houston. I was unbelievably shocked to think back and go, how the hell did I do that at age 22, at 23, at 26? I mean, and then, Al Rossiter, the science editor, taps me and says, "Hey, by the way, welcome to covering the space program." I said, but Al, wait, I can't cover, I can't cover the space program. I don't even know how planes fly. I can't do this. And he goes, "Well, you will. Thank you." And then he hung up. So then I was covering, and I became one of the 3 national space correspondents for NASA in my mid-20s. And I'm like, how does this happen? Another big story that I really think helped define my career was about financial improprieties and perhaps mismanagement within one of the largest charitable trusts in the city that had funded and founded Herman Hospital. I covered this story. They killed a story because it related to actions taken by the members of the Houston Endowment, which is another charitable trust that at that time owned the Houston Chronicle. So they killed it and said, because it pertains to our paper, we're not going to do it. And I said, that I can't brook that. I can't sleep at night. I can't look at my face in the mirror if I abide by this. So I quit. And then I went and told other reporters and did interviews. And the Washington Post did a story with the headline of Chronicle of a Scandal. When I moved to Dallas at age 30, that ripe old age of 30, I started covering everything from healthcare for the uninsured to an investigation of medical care of federal prisoners, which was, honored as a Pulitzer finalist for investigative reporting. Most people in Dallas know me because of coverage of a case involving a Methodist minister by the name of Walker Rayleigh, who was accused, eventually tried, and ultimately acquitted of a choking attack that left his wife in a permanent vegetative state. What most people don't know is that this was my minister at my church. And what they also don't know is that it was a 5-year effort to peel away the layers and the hypocrisy in the lives and the church's attempt to cover up and protect their minister. I had spent 4 years at ABC at Primetime Live working for Diane Sawyer and Sam Donaldson. At Dateline, my first story was about a KGB defector who had brought countless intelligence to the United States. But he was now, years later, suing the CIA for reneging on promises that they made him when he and his family defected, which in and of itself was quite a feat. We went to the CIA, of course, to seek their comment, feedback, anything that they would share with us to elucidate the story. They, of course, stonewalled us and then would not say anything on the record other than no comment. The CIA had started calling and pressuring the intelligence reporters at NBC News. They had started sowing doubts about the veracity of the story. And this was not a story that had a deep paper trail to it because they were all classified documents. But I had former CIA Director Jim Woolsey on camera, and I had the KGB defector on camera, but they could only say certain things. And I had other people on camera who had dealt with intelligence issues and dealing with the way the CIA treated KGB defectors, and it was bad. And so Neil basically sat me down and said, Olive, this is your first story at Dateline. Are you willing for it to be your last? And are you ready to sacrifice your career? Are you willing to stake your career on this story? That's a gut check. Dennis Murphy and I looked at each other, and I said, well, yes, I am. And Dennis said, I believe her and I trust her reporting. And he had been with me every step of the way because I was new and he was teaching me sort of the Dateline way. And we both said, we stand by the story. We never heard another peep from the CIA. They wound up settling and paying Victor Shamoff. And it was a bullying tactic to make us back off. I couldn't work in today's environment. I'd probably want to commit Harry because the pressures. You have no time to breathe. You are constantly having to feed social media. I've talked to reporters who were covering a trial who couldn't even stop to catch the defense attorney and the plaintiff's attorney before they left the courthouse to get quotes and interview them because they had to be on the air or they had to be feeding, Twitter or something. And it's like the reporting suffers because of all these constant demands. I am currently producing my first independent documentary.
Where did we come from? How did we get where we are today? Who could imagine that an obscure site deep in the heart of Texas could help unravel this mystery?
I raise the money. I'm the writer, producer, director, and yes, all of my experience in broadcasting, particularly my TV work in news magazine formats where I produced long stories, even hours, all of that prepared me to do this. Young journalists today face a more polarized and a meaner society than I think I did in my career. And reporters now and journalists are held in such low regard in society. Some of that's deserved, some of it's not. But how you treat other people and the impressions you make on others and the way you deal with them as a reporter really matter. No matter the pressure you face, you have got to be respectful and you've got to be kind, because we're often encountering people perhaps at the lowest moments or the most vulnerable moments of their lives. We don't want to leave them in worse shape than we found them. So learn to establish some trust with people. You got to be able to ask for help. Admit it when you don't know something. Step up, and say, you don't understand. Don't be afraid to say you don't understand. No matter what, be right and do whatever it takes to make sure the story is accurate. Take opportunities when they present themselves to you. Ask for help. Build a professional network and friends, a network of friends to lean on, particularly women. Join groups like investigative reporters and editors where you don't have to learn, you don't have to reinvent the wheel yourself. You can learn from other colleagues who are willing to share their hard-earned experience. And it's all about lifting up the profession. It's about enriching and deepening the profession. And like I said, seek out mentors who care about you and want to help you and see you thrive. I think I grew a lot. I think my career expanded my world in ways that I would never have imagined growing up on that farm outside of Houston, little tomboy. I am smarter. I think I've always been empathetic, but I think I'm even more empathetic about people and their foibles and their failures. I just feel like all of the experiences that I gained in journalism enriched me and enlarged my life in every way. I'm grateful for my career. I can't imagine doing it differently.